So everyone, how you doing? This is Richie the ZDAN, one of the PATTIES LOFT, one of the very popular flyers, well known in Jersey. And this is Rich right here. How you doing, Rich?
I'm doing good, and appreciate you stopping over. And as I was telling you about how I started, I was 5 years old, and we moved into a house, and there were 2 pigeons there that the previous owner promised to somebody else, but the kid was not allowed to have them, so they left them there. So my father took care of them, and everything was good. And like I said, I was 5, and when I was 13, he joined the Pigeon Club for me as a junior member. I was able to fly and win, by the way, but I couldn't bet any money on the birds. So that was 1958, and I had local birds. Different fellows gave me and all, like everybody else starting up. Most of them were havnets, Seons, Riku, and a few Bastines. I did very well, and then moved the story along. In 1971, my father went to Aruba with my mother on vacation, and they met a college professor there who won everything. He was unbeatable. So when he came home and told me that, I said, I got to go meet this guy, you know, because I had it in my blood. And so I asked my girlfriend if she would ask her mother if she could go to Aruba with me, who's now my wife, by the way, and went to Aruba, and that was the beginning of the worst life she could have. She's at the hotel, and I go off with the fellow my father met. He took me to this, he was a college professor's house.
Who was the guy? Who was the professor?
His name was Werink, his last name. He was from the Netherlands. And his brother, as we were talking that day, he was building a peninsula with redredged sand to make a new city because everything was below water. But they were wealthy people. Anyway, he was moving back to the Netherlands, and he offered to sell me birds. So I bought a bunch of them, not knowing how they would do. And once I got them home, they were in quarantine for 30 days in Clifton, and they were really beat up. The feathers were broken. They were really timid. And you'd go in the loft, and they were just sitting in a corner, all of them together, shoulder to shoulder. They were so afraid, and they were small. So I called them, and I said, I got the birds and all, and I explained what I was experiencing. And he said, first of all, in Aruba, we don't have the good grains that we do in Netherlands and Belgium. So we feed a lot of small grain, and the pigeons don't really get big after years of breeding.
And it's funny that you say that, because in Puerto Rico,
okay,
I'm from Puerto Rico, and I speak to some of the flyers out there,
yes,
and they're saying the same thing, that they don't have access to everything that we have access to as far as grain. So I know what you're saying. So
anyway, when I got the birds, actually when I was in his loft, I walked into his backyard, past his pool, and into his family room, and there were no doors. You just walked in, and it was like unbelievable. So he took me to the center of the room, and there was a painted 2x4 ladder that went up into the ceiling. He said, follow me. And then I could walk good, so I followed him up. He moved the board, and we went into his loft. And he said, that pair over there, they're pure Jansons from the Jansen brothers. And a lot of the young ones were also pure, and some second generation. He said, I'll sell you those 2 babies in a nest. I said, oh man. He said, there's 2 bands on a nail over there. You could band them. So I banded them, and of course I remember the numbers. D122 was the famous cock, and 517 was the pearl-eyed hen, a little blue bar. But going on with the story, after we visited him and I made the deal, that was November of 72. November of 72 was Thanksgiving week. And by the time I was able to get the pigeons into New Jersey in my loft, it was April 1st of 73.
Wow.
Because I couldn't get the permits, I couldn't get time in the quarantine station. But anyway, after we left his house, he said, you're going to Curacao, aren't you? I said, yeah. And he said, you got to meet my friend there. His name was Luke Brouwhuis. He was the chief of police for the whole island. And he was from Netherlands also. And he was a pigeon flyer. So we went to visit him. My wife went into the house with his wife and daughter, and they had a maid. They went in, sat inside, and he took me out into his loft and was telling me all about his birds. And he said, "See that little dark checker over there?" He said, "Catch her." So I caught her, and they had a small loft. He said she was the only bird that homed from Venezuela in the race they had. The only one
And
that
they
came
flew
home.
over water over there.
Yeah, all the Jansons that they flew there, Aruba and Curacao, they flew over water. She's the only bird at home. So I'm handling her, and she was like handling Cindy Crawford. She was beautiful. You know, her body, everything you look for. I look for qualities in feather and design and throat, very important. But anyway,
What do you look for in the throat?
I like a best example I could give you. If you look under the hood of a 1950 Ford or a 50 Chevy, you could work on the spark plugs. You could do anything you want under there. Everything's open. And if you get a new car now, you look under the hood, you don't
can't
see
see
anything.
nothing.
It's just blah.
Right.
Well, I like a pigeon that's like a 50 Ford. So getting on with the story, so he told me about this hen, how great she was and all, and you know who bred her? Ben Waring in Curacao, in Aruba. And he said, he gave me a few. He said, boy, those pigeons are really good. So now I feel good. To get on with the story real fast, the first pigeon I bred out of those, and I sold, you know, I had little kids, I was poor, you know how it is. You have to get them through college, feed them, and so on. So I sold a lot because a lot of the guys had more money than I did. They were smarter, and they were willing to spend whatever money it took. So I sold a lot of them. One of them I sold in 1981. That was Patty's Pride. I got $2,500 for that in 1981.
Wow. That was a lot of money back then.
We went to Florida with 3 little kids and came back with change. I said, oh my God. But anyway, getting on with the story, a lot of people I sold the birds to all over the country. Back then I had a standing ad in the Racing Pigeon Digest. They all did well. These birds were phenomenal, and they were Jansen pigeons. Nothing crossed in. And over the years I had birdie Jansons, which I purchased. I bought several birds from Ponderosa, Jansons also, and I always went along with the Jansen line. And you know, there's stories that the Jansons won't win long distance races, but the first bird that I ever bred out of the Jansons in '73, his number was 693. It was a slate cock, short wings, not going out like people show, like some of the pigeons that they sell, but a short forearm, and he was just perfect. But he was not.
The wingspan wasn't.
He wasn't there. He went on to win 3 500-mile races for me, and he got second in a 500-mile one-bird derby in Elizabeth, where Short Ender beat me. The Short Ender clocked, and there were only 2 day birds, his and mine. He clocked at 8:30, and I had mine 9 minutes to 9 in total darkness. We went to the club, and you know, I was like joking around. I said, we have to have these clocks reset. Oh no, you could bring him in tomorrow. And this guy started hollering, he's got a bird, he's got a bird, because you could see it on my Kelbert. And I got second, and I had him pulled, but 3 500-mile first place wins, and a second in a one-bird derby, were only with 2 day birds. So that's what I have to tell you about.
That's a big accomplishment right there.
That's what I have to tell you about the short wings. They weren't short like a penguin, but there was enough wing there to move them along.
It's funny you say that, because the average flyer, if you show them a bird and the wings aren't that big, not what I say not big, but the wingspan isn't there.
Yes.
Automatically they say, oh, he's a mid to short.
Now this one I have a record to prove, and had many other races. In fact, I flew in a Bayshore club, and of course the wind was always against me, and I won average speed, and they couldn't understand it. I said I could send a dropper and I could beat you guys, because the birds were right. They were in condition, they were fed and trained properly. And if I want to share this with some of your viewers, feed is very important. Do not let these pigeons get like turkeys. They have to feel like a piece of balsa wood, like a little balsa airplane that floats. But they have to be healthy, and you gotta train them.
How hard do you train?
Very hard. Every day, even the day after the race, 60 miles.
Wow.
And in the middle of the week, 100. I go to Shady Maple in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And that's probably 115 or 110 for me.
Right.
And several years ago, we had the IF convention race in Perth Amboy. Stanley KRAWIEC ran it. And I'm sitting here where I always would sit, and I got 7 birds on a drop in the convention race. Now, none of those birds were mine. They were all people who sent them in for me to handle. Well, I took 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And the only reason I didn't get all 6 of them in at a time, a stray came with them. And I didn't want to scare the stray up so it would beat me. So the first 3 ran in, and then once the other ones decided to go in, they went in too. But that was quite an accomplishment. And I could tell you, Eric Hall did the auction in Perth Amboy, and the bird that they were brothers, by the way, 2 nestmates. These 2 pigeons, they were sent in to me from a fella in Texas, and the first one he sold for $15.50, and his brother sold for $13.50 to someone in New York.
That's a lot of money.
And now, those 2 birds not only clocked well in an IF convention race, but I clocked them through the season also. And one of them won over $1,000 in the Freddie Breezy's Coast to Coast race. And the person who bred that bird got most of the money, but he did pay the entry, and I did the work flying them. But now, in addition to those 2, I'd have to tell you, one of them was mated to a dropper, and when that pigeon clocked in that race, and that was the Blue Bar 04, they were sitting on eggs for 23 days with the dropper. And his brother 05, during the week, I lost the mate to that pigeon. I was training it, and that pigeon sat alone without a mate for 4 or so days. And it was 25 or 26 days. I trained him every day, and he would come home before I got home, of course. He would eat and go on a nest. He would sit there all day until I caught him at 4 o'clock the next morning to take him out again. And
I haven't seen your setup yet. So you're saying you're talking about him sitting on eggs and whatever?
Yeah, in a nest box.
So are you talking about widowhood? Are you
no,
no
widowhood. He had a mate, and he was coming home to those eggs that he was waiting to hatch. But she disappeared and probably got eaten by a hawk. But anyway, going on with the story, I'm losing my thought here. People say that you can't get a bird coming to eggs over 17, 18 days. That's nonsense. These 2 cocks love their nest, and they would do anything to get home. Now, for 2 weeks before that IF convention race, 2 weeks, it was all good weather. 14 days or 15 days prior to that race, every single day, I took those birds 50 miles, and as the sun was just starting to get up, it wasn't light yet, I would single toss my whole team, which was about 18 birds, every day. And they would go straight like an arrow. They wouldn't circle. They wouldn't do anything.
You said your team was only 18 birds.
Well, that's what I was training for this IF convention race. The season was over. This was already November.
Right. Now, when you fly the club or you're flying for band races or whatever the case, how many amount of birds do you typically have in a team? And how many teams do you have?
Well, I have one team, and I'm not set up to have different teams at different ages, and that's not good. But I usually start out with somewhere around 95, 100 birds.
Okay.
And they're various ages. That's what the problem is, because when you start flying them, the older ones are going to fly, or maybe not, because they're getting too old.
Right.
And some of the young ones. So you have to put more work than you should, but I enjoyed it, so I did it. But I don't lose many pigeons, because I'm very easy on them as babies. I start them off in my driveway, and then I take them to Kennedy Park, which is a half a mile. I take them to the cemetery, another half a mile, and before you know it, I have them 3 miles, but I don't push them. And then once they're at 25 miles, they're ready to go wherever.
Right.
But I love driving. I love training. I love seeing them go over like bullets when you let them out. And when you let them out, if you have a bird that maybe doesn't want to go out of the crate, or they come out like butterflies, you know you have a problem. You better deal with it before it's too late. But they should go out snappy, and they should go like they're shot from a cannon. Getting a little further ahead with the Jansen pigeons, out of that 693, the slate cock, who had that great record, had a son from him. And it was a late hatch, and it was just beautiful. Beautiful chest, typical Jansen pigeon. And I had a call from a fella in Puerto Rico from Bayamon.
Woo!
And he worked for Coca-Cola. So he said, he heard about me and all. He's interested in birds and all. And
what was his name? You remember?
Yep. I can get it for you, but
yeah,
I have
get
to
that
check
name
my
for
old
me. I
paperwork.
want. Yeah.
But I can't remember right now. I'm getting old and frail. But anyway, get on with the story. He bought this Jansen young cock from me, and he was selling young ones from years out of that cock to all the big money men down there, whether it be doctors or whatever. He said that cock went on to have quite a reputation in Puerto Rico. If there's any old guys alive, they might still remember it. But I was very proud of that. And he bought a few others too to add to it after he was successful with that one. But he was not a rich man, but he did do well after he bought this bird. And I could go on, but maybe next time I could add a little more and tell you about some of the other birds I have.
All right, thank you, Richie. We're gonna be doing this in segments. We just met. The gentleman is a gentleman and a scholar, and we'll definitely be getting back to doing some more videos, more clips, and we're gonna make this a great segment for YouTube.
One thing I have to say, Paul, if I could, I'm old now, I'm not well, and if I could help newer flyers with some of the things that I've learned over the years, and a lot of the people who I learned from are dead a long time. Some people didn't want to share a lot of things, but I always listened and tried things that could work. When you look at a pigeon, there's so many things to look at. I bought 15 young ones from a fella many, many years ago, and when he gave me those 15 pigeons and the parents that bred them, the numbers, alongside of it was what speed I would win with those pigeons. Now, this is like in the early 80s. Who could do that? All these big pigeon flyers around who have countless dollars and resources, how many could tell you what pair of understand the 3 birds making 1,800 plus? Well, as it went on, he was absolutely right. I had one blue checker. He was a long bird, and I really didn't like him. And when I would go to the club at Young Birds, I never saw him come home. Every race I put him in, he never came home on race time. I'd get back from the club, and he'd be sitting on his perch. So I called up my friend, and I told him about this. He said, Richie, he said, did you see the paperwork that I sent you? That bird is not going to come in these kind of races. He said, try it in old birds. Well, to go on with the story, I won a real tough 400-mile race with that bird. Anybody else probably would eliminate it after Young Birds. But
Right.
that's how much this guy knew. And I'd be happy to share these things with the younger fellows.
Well, this is the whole our objective with this this segment that we're gonna be doing is so that you could, share your experiences. I'm not gonna tell you what you want, what you should or what you shouldn't share, but anything that you think that a new flyer, a new person that's interested in the hobby, or even an old flyer, there, because a lot of old timers they're stuck on a old system sometimes that, in my opinion, doesn't work anymore. Some people have to evolve with the times, and hopefully, with us going through these segments, you'll be able to share some of your experiences and what has worked for you. Because at the end of the day, we can hear advice from very solid people, and if we don't apply it, then guess what? It's just going in one ear and out the
I
other,
understand.
and you'll never be able to see any results. As in my case, for instance, you know, I've had to try to along the way talking to solid people. Like I have one guy named B-Rod, 681 out of Florida. He flies out of Space Coast Races in Palm Bay, Florida, and one or two guys in the area. But you know, sometimes you need someone like local, like yourself,
Right.
where you could hands-on, that you could physically see stuff, like you were just telling me about the throat, and you know, and certain little things. That is worth more than $1 million, you know. But I'm pretty sure that you're gonna have a lot of information to give a lot of the viewers.
Before we end, I just want to conclude with saying, here in New Jersey, you're not allowed to use a dark system. New Jersey, New York, it's prohibited. And they have a 5-flight rule, so when you go ship to specials, they have to at least malt out 5 flights. But I don't darken. What I do is use the lighting system. And when I go to my first race at the beginning of August, whether it's the 8th, the 10th, or the 12th, my pigeons are all malted out. They're like old birds. In fact, the secretaries check the band to make sure it's the right year. They're all malted out. They're mature pigeons. But that's what the lights will do.